Hi everyone, my name is Tatiana Brown and this is Black Lives Matter, so now how do we talk about it? I'm going to just take a second to set the context for this talk. Um, there are a few people here that you can see, and I'm closing my laptop over there, that you can see are going to be participating as panelists. One of them is sitting with me right here, Amber Butts. There's also on the call Kim, Kimberly McCrae, all the way to us from Brooklyn, and from also in the East Bay, Marcia Baczynski. I have the distinct honor of getting to know all of three of these incredible women, so I'm just going to take a second and set the tone for what we're about here today. If you're here, you read the invite, you have a sense of what's going on. But I want to give you a little bit about how this conversation came about and where it comes from. A lot of it, as far as I'm concerned, started around Thanksgiving. Amber was with me on. I went home to my family for the first time in 6 years for Thanksgiving, and we talked a bunch while I was there. And I had the great. I don't know what I would have done without Kim during that time either. And we were having conversations about what it means to bring what you believe about, like the truth that we all seem to agree on, and that just we know is the case around the Black Lives Matter movement, what it is to bring that to people who aren't necessarily listening for that truth in the same way. And those conversations that we were having with family, we were a support for one another around that. And at the same time, Marcia has been instrumental in having a lot of conversations with other people. And so last Friday, this all happened very last minute. Last Friday, Marcia and I, as we were talking, we were like, what if we just had this be a public conversation where we acknowledged the tools we were using, the places we were having a hard time, and the fact that I think all of us do agree that it is a pretty consistently, it is one of the most important things that all of us can be doing, is having these conversations with people that we love. Because they're more likely to listen to us than the news, than just about anybody. So I want to take a second and introduce each of the people that I'm with. They're going to stop being silent and be very, very vociferous participants very soon. And so to just set context, the people that you have on the call with you right now are I'm pointing at the computer like that makes any difference. We're talking with one of my dear friends and colleagues, Kimberly McCrae. She is the program coordinator for the Women's Center at Duke University. She, in her professional work, is involved in bringing together a generation of activists who understand sustainability and balance and clear communication. Watching her do the work that she does with her community is some of the most inspiring shit that I get to do in my professional life. It's true, and she's somebody that she and I have been building a relationship around being able to talk through these things across privilege for a few years now, right, Kim?
Yeah, it's been, what, 3 years?
I think so. Yeah.
3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah. My dear friend Amber, who's sitting in my living room with me while we're doing this ridiculous thing, is just finished up at St. Mary's College, where she helped found and run the Lounge, which is an open mic space monthly. Is it monthly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a monthly open mic space that gives people a chance to speak without an actual safe container to express themselves around issues, not just that, but also around issues of systemic oppression. And I feel like she reads the entire internet every day, and I have pretty much never had a conversation with Amber that wasn't even when she needs to tell people about themselves, which I have watched. It is consistently done with love and grace, and in a way that obviously makes the other person leave thinking about it, which is a thing that I've valued for really we've only known each other for a year and a half, but
yeah,
and
curse words
and curse words. We're gonna do some of those today.
A couple of them.
One or two of those. Maybe. And then last in this group is my dear friend who I moved here from New York with, Marcia Baczynski. Marcia is a communication coach and educator. She mostly has worked a lot in like relationship and intimacy work with couples and individuals. She founded this thing called Cuddle Party, which like happens all over the world now and has been in the New York Times and is very fancy. She's generally quite fancy.
Sorry.
No. And in addition to that, is somebody that I've gotten to, explore my brain with for like 8 years. So that's a group of people that are all talking today. I want to say a few more things about what our structure is, and I'm going to stop talking. And also what this conversation is and what it is not. Did Kim just disappear? Okay.
She's nearby.
Sorry. Technology. So the first thing is we all accept, like, as our baseline that ending the slow genocide of Black people in this country is, like, pretty much the most important thing that we can be doing. That the grief around that is real, the pain around that is real, and it's super important to be paying attention to. And we're not going to really be up for debate on whether that's a real thing in this conversation. What we are going to be doing is looking at how to take that experience and share it with people who might not yet be all the way convinced as we are. The other things that I want to say is all of these people in this conversation, at least in my experience, are badasses, but none of us are pretending that we have this exactly right. This is very much a relationship. And I think it's important to note that, like, as we're having this conversation, this is, like, based on our lived experience and, like, the things that are useful to us to be, or, like, have proved useful to us. But we're not trying to say that there's one right way to do this. And I think, like, more so than that, it's going to be real, like, one of the big takeaways that I want people to have from this conversation is just knowing that, like, this work is being done constantly, and we're all constantly trying to have skills involved. So I think that covers what there is to be said to set up the conversation. Before we jump into it, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how it's going to go. We're going to do 4 rounds. Sorry?
One more thing that we had talked about ahead of time, too, is just to clarify, we are also not going to be talking about how to argue with strangers on the internet as much in this call. We want to keep the focus on actual relationships with people we actually care about, for the most part. We may wander, but...
Also, one more thing, just going along with that, we're also going to be working on, like, sustainable conversations with our loved ones
Yes.
that have a beginning, and we want that to evolve. So this will be like a little course into how we're building our conversations around the people that we love, and your input is always necessary.
Yeah. And also, like, I think like going with that. Thank you for catching that, Amber. That was important. A lot of what this work does, like, especially when you feel the urgency of it, you have this sense of, like, I need you to get it right now. But I at least know from my personal experience that the people that I feel like most successful with and most I've actually watched them be changed and watched them become more compassionate and aware and progressive around these issues. Those conversations have taken years, like actual years. And so, yeah, this is about the long game, and this is about all of us supporting each other and sustaining one another through the long game. So, thank you all for adding that. Kim, do you have anything you want to toss in the beginning?
Just kind of want to make sure that everyone goes into this conversation with a mentality of introspection in order to engage the external. So we're not just talking about the issues or concerns that we have with those around us concerning this, but we want to also make sure that we're staying in touch with ourselves, our feelings, our truths, our realities, so that all of that is coming out authentically in the conversations that we're having with people.
Yes. So that is part of why my friend Kim is a badass. Moments. So let me just jump into structure. Thank you for saying that. All of that was super important. Good to keep in my brain. Our structure is going to work like this. We're going to do 4 rounds? We're doing 4 rounds of information. The first thing we're going to do is we're all going to talk a little bit. It's going to be co-facilitated by tons of people, by everybody on this call. It's going to take a moment to facilitate. I'm going to step back in a second once I tell you this. The first section that we're going to talk about is roadblocks and obstacles. And And so we're just going to share some of the rough things that we've been through, like things that we've been afraid of, things that have actually happened, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to take a second and each take a moment to like respond to and connect with everybody else's stuff. And we're going to keep going from that section of like talk about a thing in the panel, and then connect with each other back and forth. The next section that we're going to do is self-assessment, like looking at what your own goals are, and who you're trying to reach and why. The third section that we're going to do is looking at how you address the loved one that you're talking to, and like what are some useful tools and resources for that. And then the last section that we're going to do is on self-care, how to make sure that we're handling this in a sustainable fashion. That all being said, as soon as that's all done, we're going to go to a Q&A section, and we're going to go over. We got some really amazing questions from people before the start of this talk, and so we're going to go over some of those and respond. That being said,
Where they can go to ask questions.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so y'all can go to our Facebook page, and also what's the tiny URL?
It's tinyurl.com/BLM panel.
Yes.
BLM panel.
BLM panel. So I think that was posted on was that posted on the Google Hangouts page?
It's on the Google Hangouts page, and it's on the Facebook event page, so y'all just click on that and ask questions.
Fantastic. If you have, we didn't check on this before we started. Marsha or Kim, are either of you going to be looking at the Google Hangout?
I can monitor.
I would love that. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to be the facilitator. Next, can we talk about roadblocks?
Who's next?
The roadblocks.
Right. Yep. Oh my God.
Tanya, I thought you were doing it.
I thought I was doing just the intro. Hey, do you want to do
Sure.
I mean, we can all offer
we decided to
something.
do this on Friday.
Well, we can all offer something that we've experienced
absolutely.
as a roadblock.
Absolutely.
I mean, I personally have found myself to be a roadblock in a lot of conversations because a lot of the work that I do around this is, like Tatiana was saying, with a younger generation and a new generation of activists, and I'm coming to terms with the fact that I am middle-aged. So I am a different generation, and a lot of what I have learned and a lot of the way that I've been socialized does not necessarily work for this generation of activists. A lot of the methods that we used, a lot of the ways that we developed conversation and community are not the same now, and they're not as effective now. And as much as we would like a lot of times to kind of sit in our comfort of what we did before and make it work again, just coming to the realization that I can't do that, and I need to, in order to remain relevant and be able to help myself be effective and the people that I'm talking to and working with be effective, then it's important to not only teach but to learn. Mm-hmm. So learning some of what they know and some of what's comfortable to them or uncomfortable to them and some of what works, and understanding some of the methods of communication that happen now. There was no social media when I was growing up. If I can just date myself a little bit, there was no email, there were no DVDs. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. But just to put that out there, I mean, there are so many other methods of communication and interaction and engagement now that I can't just defer to the things that were familiar to me when I started doing this work. I have to continue to learn and actively engage people, not just media, and not just get information from detached places, but be able to actively engage people. So I found that my own comfort zone in doing this work often serves to be a roadblock in being able to do multi-generational work around this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think there are a few roadblocks for me. One is like when I'm really upset, keeping the goals in mind are so hard for me. Like, I'll be like, you just said some fucked up shit, and I need you to know you said some fucked up shit. And now I will say, I need you to know you said some fucked up shit, and here's why, and I'll, like, lay it out for the people. So the people. So for me, that's helpful. And I think also with like what Kim is saying, like adapting is so important. If the goal is that you want to do this sustainable work and make a change, figuring out ways that you can adapt and figuring out ways that you can pull from certain sources are really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking on the internal roadblocks thing. I mean, I'm a white girl from Georgia, and my parents were not overtly racist and didn't have much tolerance for overt racism, but I was steeped in it. And like I've been looking at this conversation for 20 years now, and I still am like stepping in it all the time. And it took me literally years of working on this before I could just like notice that I stepped on it and not like get wrapped up in the thing of like I'm a bad person, it's just like a bad thing, like me, and like all of that stuff. And you know, I wrote a thing for one of my coaching groups yesterday about this talk, and I had this realization. I teach a class called the Good Girl Recovery Program, and I realized that like this internalized model of like being a good girl, like being a good white girl, means don't speak up and don't rock the boat and don't cause conflict. And like just realizing the ways that I've been socialized to kind of smooth things over and be a peacekeeper and all of that, like directly harms people of color.
Yeah.
And is like, I mean, it's, you know, we can talk about intersectionality and all of that, but like that's a really real thing where I've had to really spend a lot of time looking at like why is it so important to me to look good and to like not rock the boat, and to, you know, I think this year has been really radicalizing for me because I've been having back channel conversations for years, and I'm like, getting up in public is like directly in conflict with this good girl model of don't rock the boat. So I think the way that I'm choosing to deal with that is just like challenging myself to be a little bit braver on the regular, and then also like inviting other people who are in a similar position as me to do the same. But you know, I love that you started this with the internal thing, Kim, because like it's, yeah, I'm on that boat with you.
I mean, I even heard you catch yourself in your language. Certain words, like a lower position, okay, that might not be good for a conversation like this. You know, just catching your own language and the way that we just generally communicate, and being able to, on the drop of a dime, switch direction in order to keep from creating a really, really bad moment. You know, so yeah, it's a roadblock.
Yeah, you can't see it if you're in it, and if you're not in it, you can see it, and I'm in it.
Well, okay. Oh, you. Yes. Thanks for sharing that, Marcia. I really actually appreciate like having the like not causing a scene idea be brought up. For me, an internal roadblock that keeps coming up is how. Also, yeah, Kim, badass of you to start here. I find myself reverting to the younger version of me when I'm having conversations with loved ones, like specifically family, and like I have probably always been like way too progressive for my family, like in a lot of ways. Like I think there are a lot of ways where like my political roots come from my family, but then there are other places where like I remember when I became vegetarian and Thanksgiving, like that was its own terrible thing. Like, oh my God, what now? Meat? What the hell is her problem? Like, it's always been that kind of friction. And so for me, in bringing up these kinds of conversations is an internal thing. Like what I'm finding myself struggling with constantly is like not becoming righteously indignant 16-year-old me. You know, like that version of me like needed to happen the way that she did. She was figuring out how to talk in front of people and how to have a voice and all that shit, and like it's actually not conducive to good conversation, and it's not the quality of communication I want to be having with the people I love. And so the thing that I'm finding myself doing pretty regularly is like I'm like constantly working against, like when I'm having a conversation with somebody that I love, like an aunt or an uncle or like my sisters or somebody like that, I'm finding myself having to be like, wait, it's still 28-year-old me. That's right. This is the me that I am. I'm not in high school anymore. Shit's cool. And like constantly checking that is like part of keeping the conversation going.
Yeah, and I think I'm similar too, because like my family's so used to me always talking about things that I am interested in, to the point to where it's muted after a while. So when someone says something that offends me and I bring it up, it's like, oh yeah, that's just Amber being Amber. So they don't listen. And so what I find myself doing is stewing and being really upset, and then maybe I'll say something about it. But for the most part, it's another. Even if I say something about it, I'm still feeling like someone is like bringing me down and like silencing me and like suppressing everything that's happening as I'm working through this thing, which is like, for folks who have experienced this, like fucked up. Yeah.
Totally. Kim, did you have more? Do you want to like switch to external, or do you want to talk about like more stuff on your end?
Oh, she's muted.
How are you muted? How is that happening?
Kim's muted.
Oh no, I did that. So I'm in Brooklyn right now with my kids and my family. So I kind of, if I disappear, it's not because I've disappeared. Every now and then someone will come in and say something or whatever. So yeah, I muted so that I could talk to my daughter real quick. Okay. But no, I'm good. We can continue with the conversation. Because I'm looking at the time, I can't believe how quickly time goes. It's already 8 o'clock, my time. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe let's move on to, like, well, do we want to just do one quick round of, like, potential external obstacles that we've encountered, like, from real experience?
Okay.
Lightning round it?
Cool. Yeah.
I can definitely speak about that a little bit. So I'm a Black woman, in case nobody noticed that. And that often becomes an external obstacle before the conversation even gets started, because it winds up being a conflict for me with my external and my internal, because I become very aware of what I'm going to say before I say it, because I don't want to be mistaken as an angry Black woman. I don't often like to have these kinds of conversations over texting or messaging because the tone can be mistaken. So that winds up becoming an issue for me, because even if I'm being very passionate, it can be mistaken because there is a stereotypical understanding of what a Black woman is in this country and in this society. And also, it doesn't help that people automatically assume that Black people with locks are like Black Panthers and power to the people, and you know, we're going to burn shit down and all of that. So I mean, it becomes that winds up for me often being one of the biggest struggles that I have trying to enter a conversation, because before a person can get to the actual information that I have to offer, they've already made a judgment and an assessment about who I probably am entering that space. Mm-hmm. So I'll start there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yep. So for me, similar experience, but my perception is different. So I'm like, cool, like I'm the angry lady. Let me just say a few things. Let me throw you off a little bit. So I'll come into the conversation maybe with what Kim was saying, a little more aware of what's happening and the dynamics that are happening in that space. So like I'll start off, maybe this is possible, with me being a little tamer version of myself. I don't like that phrasing or anything like that, but for the sake of like being concise, I'll say that. And then I'll just go right in. And like little background, my grandparents were Black Panthers. Like I'm a Black woman. And so I just have a different way of communicating. But sometimes, yeah, like that passion can be viewed as anger, and I'm like, hell yeah, like I'm angry, shit's happening, I'm angry every day. But also, just because I'm angry, it doesn't take away from my message and what I'm saying. So I like to try to figure out how I can channel that anger into a space for me to be able to communicate with other folk. Yeah.
Much. I think one of the external roadblocks that I encounter is people who want to minimize the problem and minimize the conversation. Like when you bring up that shit is really terrible, and you get like, I think that's part of what the whole like all lives matter derailment is actually about, is being like, well, no, but this isn't any more of a problem than all of the other things that are happening that are terrible in the world. Or it's like, that's one example. Or like, I've had a number of conversations with people who want to bring up, for example, that there's more than, I can't say this without being angry, that there's more than one reason that Eric Garner died, instead of just that he was violently assaulted by a police officer. Like, they'll bring up, like, Wade or, like, all that other dumb shit, and, like, I find myself in these moments, like being surprised. I mean, like, I have the tools to get through it, and we're going to talk about that, but, like, it is surprising when you come up against somebody who says something so blatantly wrong-headed, like, when you're just like, wow, you honestly think it's appropriate. You think that's the answer to the question. Okay. And, like, I find myself feeling like the conversation has, like, been set back to, like, 1956 or something like that, instead of where it is right now.
Yeah, and also there's a reset, because you have to be like, okay, maybe I want to, like, entertain that, but also this other thing. So, like, let's move you back to what the initial conversation was. And that's, like, exhausting and upsetting, because you're like, wait, how the fuck did we get here?
Yep.
Upsetting.
That is pretty much how that.
As far as external obstacles, one that I run into a lot is not knowing, like, when I'm talking online, which is not the focus of this conversation, but it happens enough where I am so willing to, like, go slow and take my time with somebody who doesn't get it but knows they don't get it and wants to get it, because I've been there. And I really tremendously value people who are on their learning curve, even if they're walking, like, into their blind spots over and over and over again. Like, I'll sit with them. But somebody who both is doing that and has no interest in learning about it, and then starts engaging with certain rhetorical flourishes. I like to argue. I used to be in a logic club because I'm a giant dork.
Oh my God.
And when people start doing ad hominem attacks, or, like, I don't need to go into all the Latin, there's books for that, but, like, I will just tear them apart online, and it's not good, because it doesn't move the conversation forward, and I get so triggered, and I'm like, you are not going to out-logic me, and I get really, really angry, and, like, I have to back away from the keyboard and, like, just go chill out for a little while, because my blood pressure will get so high, and then and that's one of the reasons I avoided talking about this publicly for so long, is that, online is a major forum for public conversation. Yeah, I don't do well with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I feel like we've covered a good amount of, like, what the what like the obstacles and roadblocks can look like in these conversations. I kind of want us to move forward so that we can keep the conversation moving.
Let's do it.
And of what we were going to talk about is self-assessment for you as an individual, which I think, Marcia, you were going to cover?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit prior to getting on the phone with each other about, going into these conversations, we a lot of times either consciously or unconsciously have something we're trying to accomplish. And so I would love to hear from everybody. First of all, how do you tell if you're in a space to have a conversation at all? And then we can cover that more in the self-care section. But also, how do you figure out, like, what your goals in the conversation are, and, like, who are you trying to reach, why, like, that kind of thing. I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on that.
For me, a lot of what it involves is like me not seeing angry things happen in the news and on the internet, or have people say really hurtful things about like black folk or folk who I think like need like people supporting them and having a system that allows them to have like better lives, but gives them better lives. Also, what I think I realized too is like I'm constantly trying to figure out where I'm at and assessing where I'm at when I'm having a conversation with someone. Because, like I said, I'm angry. I'm also really happy, so it just fucks shit up sometimes. So sometimes I ask myself, do I have space for this conversation? And when I say conversation, I mean an emotional space. And can I be compassionate in this conversation and possibly also loving to this person? Because sometimes I'm like, no, I'm not down for that shit. That's fucked up. I don't have the space for it. I'm angry. I want to scream today. I cannot do it. So for me, it's just like more of an emotional assessment, and then I can figure out how far I want to go with it. Yeah.
For me, so there are a couple of things. I've got all kinds of thoughts going on in my head right now. So definitely an emotional assessment, a self-check to see what I've got going on and to make sure that I'm actually properly invested in the conversation before I begin to engage it. I am always very passionate about social justice and making sure that justice is served and that everybody's voice is taken seriously and is given space to be heard. At the same time, I recognize that because I'm so passionate about social justice as a whole, then sometimes it does become difficult to not prioritize which issues of activism need to be at the top of the list and the ones that might not be quite as important to me personally. So I don't like to engage, although I'm definitely interested in everybody being heard and everybody having what they're supposed to have as far as their rights and their freedom. And I do recognize that there are certain issues that are more personal to me, like women's issues, black issues, issues around issues around lower economic status. There are certain issues that are more personal for me. So I like to check in with myself and make sure that whatever lens or filter through which I'm entering the conversation is not going to somehow demoralize or make smaller whatever issue the person is bringing to the table. So if someone is coming to me to talk to me about transgendered issues, that's not an issue that's personal for me, but it is an issue that I'm passionate about because it's a social justice issue and it's a human issue. So I have to make sure that I'm not trying to equate it to an issue that is my issue, so that I'm not giving the impression that, well, this is important to me. So, because I deal with this, then I imagine that you feel this way about your struggle. That's just not fair. So making sure that struggles and the issues that we're talking about are dealt with as individual issues as opposed to kind of lumping everything in the same category. So that winds up being a struggle for me, if you couldn't tell by the way I kind of went all the way around the world to get to that point. But yeah, that winds up being a struggle for me.
That was great.
Yeah.
Tanya, do you want to talk, or do you want to? Do you need a sec?
We're just having a moment of moving things.
Okay.
If y'all can hear me, I can talk real quick. I'd be happy to.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So the thing that I would first say, oh yeah, that's great. Okay, sorry, we're having lighting issues because it's so dark out. Fuck it, I'm gonna sit on the ground. Okay. So the first thing that I want to say is, like, my goal, like always, pretty much across the board, is for the people that I'm talking to be able to feel the conversation in their bodies. And that's a tricky thing. And Kim, I'm so excited that you brought up the idea of not trying to have us like play the game of equating one form of oppression to another, and like trying to make one be the same as like if I feel this way about like trans issues, then you must feel this way about like your like issues of race and economics. I really, really appreciate that, but part of that for me is like I think the most profound changes I've experienced and the things that have caused me to change my behavior and prioritize relating to the world differently and like really being invested in change is that like when I read the stories about because of the exposure that I have, like I can't read about that's a good idea. I can't read about like the story of Tamir Rice and his family and like what they went through the day that he was murdered. I can't read that and not feel it in my body. Like, and having that feeling in my body is the thing that makes me want to change things, you know? And I think that it's really important to know like that my experience of that is not the same as like a black person's experience of that. But by having that experience in my body, like what I know from that is that we have like at least to some extent broken through all of the ways I've been socialized to devalue Black lives. And like that's where the feeling happens. And for me, my goal always when I'm talking with my family, when I'm talking with friends or loved ones, when I'm talking with like anybody about these issues, the thing that I keep coming back to is like I need to know that it is possible for you to feel this in your body, you know? Like, your heart, if your heart doesn't hurt from this stuff, you haven't listened yet, you know? And, like, so like that.
Is somebody writing down quotes from this? Oh, my gosh, that was so amazing.
Viewers doing it or something. The viewers.
Yeah, thanks for watching, Mel. Really, really do appreciate it. But yeah, that is my perpetual goal. Like as a white person talking to other white people, like the reason I'm having the conversation is not for points. It's not to make everything feel politically correct, which by the way is not a real thing. But that's a whole other conversation. Political correctness is a way to police people out of being kind to each other. But I think that like what I find myself doing is being like, if you, like, I just want to know that, like, we can agree that this thing is urgent and that we know it in our hearts. And like, I want to talk about, like, when we get to the audience stuff, like, I have a lot of assessing that I do in terms of, like, how much energy I put in and what kind of energy. Like, I was telling Amber earlier today, like, I maybe have an uncle that it is my goal to make him cry. And it's not my goal to make him cry, like, have him, like, I don't want him to, I don't want
to break him. You're not trying to break him.
I don't want to, what I want is for him to have this experience in his heart and in his body enough that while he's raising his children, he's communicating from that authentic place. And so we can talk about that more later, but that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Nice. Thanks for that. My mind is being blown by like everything you all have said so far, and you all touched on things that I also carry with me. Kimberly, thank you for the equalizing thing. That's also a huge thing that I try to keep in mind. Yeah, I think when I'm looking at my own self-assessment, and this starts to get into the goals with other people, but it's kind of it's like, who am I trying to reach and why? And I really try to be clear about why I'm trying to reach them. Like, why is it important to me? Why was it important to me to send an invitation to my brother and sister-in-law about this talk? Why? Like, am I available to have a follow-up conversation with those people? There are some people I am available for that for, and some people I'm not, largely due to, like, sheer logistical limitations of time, days, hours in the day, right? And energy and all of that. Tanya, the thing you said about kindness really landed for me because I I feel like in all of the conversations, like if I don't have the capacity to be kind, I should not be having the conversation.
Ding, 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 ding.
And like, you know,
Wow.
and I don't always have the capacity to be kind. Like, I mean,
Oh my
sometimes I'm
gosh,
too pissed off. Sometimes I'm dealing with I'm dealing with other things. There's other. This is not my wheelhouse. Like I'm a sex educator. I deal with gender and sexuality all day long. You know, and it's a hard world out there, and we're all fighting a lot of battles. And you know, and it's important to me to make time. It's important to me to put attention on this, and it's important not just to go through the motions. And so if I find myself going through the motions, like I need to back the fuck off because I'm not moving the conversation forward, in my opinion. Because I don't think that winning an argument helps much in my world. I've also kind of come to the conclusion that though facts and statistics can be really helpful for putting things in perspective and like getting scope, like I don't think that I've ever successfully convinced people with just numbers. It's almost always stories. And like if I'm not able to bring that, like I can argue, I'm good at arguing, but that doesn't mean that I'm winning the battle.
I totally feel you on that, Marcia. I want to just jump in because you did a thing that made my brain do an aha thing, and I want to respond.
Sure.
And I think we should all like do a round of responses after this because so much has been said. The first thing is you were talking about when you feel it and when you're not feeling it, and I think one of the roadblocks that I come up against when before I went and talked with my family, before I like went to Thanksgiving and sat and had a bunch of difficult conversations, I was convinced that all of that shit was just going to be like Tatiana, the 17-year-old vegetarian, you know? And like nobody was going to listen to me and it was going to be bullshit. And like, and when I, you know, breathed and got through it, like the thing that I realized was I actually, if I'm starting from a place of love with my family, like I have a lot more space than I thought I did.
Yeah.
And I think that's different. Like I think it's different for each person, and I think it's really important to assess and really be honest about where you are. But like if I am coming with my family instead of from an original place of judgment, if I'm coming from an original place of like vulnerability and sincerity and affection, when I'm like, no, like I actually love these people, and like when that's the first thing that comes out of my mouth, the entire conversation changes.
Yeah.
And it's not just, and that happens in two ways. Like one, on my end, it reminds me that I do love these people, and that's why I'm here, right? Like so often when we're dealing with family, we're doing it from a place of obligation, right? Like, oh God, I'm just doing this like because I have to. But if instead you turn it and you're like, no, I'm here because I keep being here, because I keep choosing to be here. Therefore, I'm not leaving. Therefore, I must love these people enough to stick around. Like all of a sudden, internally, I have so much more available. And then on the other hand, when the first thing out of my mouth, instead of being judgment and like going through the motions, as you said, Marcia, if instead what comes out of my mouth first is love, they are disarmed. And they're not disarmed in a dangerous way. They're disarmed in like a healthy like way that actually creates dialogue, you know? And so especially while we're going to talk about self-care, and I think that's important, but I want to put it out there that like we do have more room in these conversations than we think we do most of the time. Does anybody else want to jump in and make some connections?
Well, I mean, I think this is a good segue into like the third thing that we're doing, but I want to make sure everyone has the space to talk if they need to.
Oh my God, I want to talk for like 6 days, and we've got like 40 minutes. So let's keep moving.
We should do this again, part 2.
Yeah.
So
do you want to intro the? Wait, we're at yeah, this is you.
This is you, Amber.
Cool. I knew that. I just didn't know if someone else wanted to do the intro.
No. I think everyone who's watching knows that Amber is kind of, a loud genius, which is what we wanted.
Cool. Okay. I'm gonna put that on a card.
Yeah, you should.
So one of the focuses that I'm doing is communicating with a loved one. And these are important in like different ways, right? But one of the things that I like to think about with communicating with a loved one is like, this person is not a stranger. I know this person's patterns. I know what they don't like to eat. Like, I know all of this shit. So, like, using that to your advantage is great. Knowing their stories are really important. Like, say, for instance, my grandma, like, is really intense. And I know that I can't say hoarder in front of her. Like, I know trigger words for her. So think about the ways that you can, like, have alternative ways of communicating with your family. You know, sticking points. I don't mean don't ever bring up Black Lives Matter, because bring that shit up. Bring it up. I'm not ever going to say don't bring that up. Aside from that, you know that there are things that you can talk about with your family in different ways. So find those different ways if you know that, like, you're going to be shut off in one instance. Keep in mind that you know these people and they are not strangers. I think that's the hardest part for me sometimes, because when I'm communicating with my loved ones, I'm like, damn, they still think of me as a child. Like, I'm like this big-haired, like, hippie that reads books and is in college. But aside from that, it's just like, oh, that's just Amber. She used to not eat meat. Like, she's all right. She got a cat. But really, what you need to, what's important for you to do is, like, assert yourself and, like, let them see you as an adult. Let them see you as an equal. Like, that's one of the things that is important, because, you know, you can feel like you're being minimized if you're having a conversation, especially with an elder. Yeah. I'll wait for other folks to talk, and then I'll go into more stuff. I don't want to be the only one talking. Possibly.
I think it's important.
How you doing?
Well, I think it's important in all that you just said. So these are people that we know that we're primarily talking about having these conversations with. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we know them, but they know us too. So if you feel yourself getting triggered by certain things that are happening and being said, then sometimes it's important to remove yourself from feeling that trigger and recognize this person knows how to push my buttons, or they know how to create a distraction around whatever it is that we're trying to get to here. So just redirecting both yourself and them back to whatever the central focus of the conversation was. So not getting so caught up in the, oh, you said that? I can't believe you said that. Well, don't you know, blah, blah, blah. Just being able to say, okay, I heard you. Got it. Now, we were talking about and redirecting the conversation back to whatever it is that needs to be talked about, that they're probably doing a very good job of dodging, because they know you're going to follow them wherever it is that they go. So, yeah, that was kind of, exactly. That was kind of coming to mind while I was listening. And also, knowing the people that we're talking to, but also realizing that even though we know them and can use some of the things that we know about them as ways to facilitate a conversation, to be very mindful that we're not being manipulative of those things that we know about them, and trying to push our agenda, because sometimes they're just not going to agree, or they're just not going to get on the same page, and not being so determined to push our agenda as opposed to sharing information and being able to hear differing points of view and acknowledge them as valid, and not be personally offended by something that someone is saying that may not necessarily be personal. It may just be their point of view. So being able to stay distanced enough from that personal relationship to still have the conversation and have it effectively.
Yeah, I think too, like, I think someone wrote this quote, but it was something about, like, most times we listen to respond instead of listening to empathize, be compassionate, and just have a different perspective. If we do that and we lead with compassion, then that kind of then that goes against the other falling into the patterns and manipulating folks. And also, I think a huge step is, like, naming your feelings. So, like, when you're feeling something, this will kind of go into the self-care thing, which I'm not going to get into at the moment, but naming your feelings is really important. Like, I know I have an aunt and an uncle. We're, like, a year apart, a year and a half apart. And so always around the holidays, they'll do something that really frustrates me. And then after an hour of doing the shit that we did when we were teenagers, I'm like, oh, damn, Amber, actually, You're 25. You probably shouldn't be still doing that shit. Yeah. Change it. And then I'm like, oh, aha. And I'm like, hey, okay, so this is what I felt and this is what I heard. What did you mean by that? And that opens up the space more for someone to talk about, like, how they felt and what they meant. Mm-hmm. The other person felt and what they meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I want to jump in, if that's cool. I'm just going to...
Hang on, I want to just check on Kimberly. Do you have to go?
Hey, Kim?
Okay, she's saying hang on.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My computer is moving like really, really slowly, but yeah, I'm gonna have to dip out in a couple of minutes. I hate that. But I do want to go over the self-care part though.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna have to
bookmark this because there's a couple things that I think Tanya wants to say and I want to say, but let's do the self-care and come back to both.
Yeah.
For
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sure, yeah. So I'm sorry to have to kind of go early. Didn't anticipate that. But so self-care, I'm finding, is a large part of activism that does not get discussed enough. We're so busy being passionate about taking care of the rest of the world that we often forget that we are very much human beings and we need someone and some things to care for us too. So, and I'm not even going to say too as if it's an afterthought, which is what it usually is. And usually it only comes into play when we're sick and can no longer function or something like that. So rather than say we need to be cared for too, I will say we need to be cared for primarily because we cannot effectively do the work if we are wiped out. So one of the things that I always encourage my students to do is to make sure that they can identify their happy, and whatever that is, it somehow needs to be incorporated into the activism that they're doing, because otherwise you will lose your passion for the work you're doing. If there's no happy in there, because, I mean, this is heavy work. This is heavy work. These are hard conversations. There's a lot of emotional pull that goes with this, especially when you're having conversations like Tatiana did over Thanksgiving with family members, and you go in and you want to be so hopeful that these people are really the people that you love, and you want them to be this on this higher level of living and understanding, and you get into the conversation and you find, oh my God, okay, this isn't quite what I was expecting, you know. So there's a lot of emotion that goes into, a lot of emotion and passion that goes into having these conversations and remaining fully present. Mm-hmm. And if we don't keep in mind that once you step away from that conversation, you've got to have something that you can identify almost in the spur of the moment as something that looks like center. And if you don't, then it's very possible for your anger to wind up misdirected. You may turn it in on yourself. You may, I mean, there are just so many ways that good stuff goes wrong because there isn't a proper outlet for the passion and emotion that is housed in all of that work. So just want to encourage everyone to identify your happy and be able to make that a part of the work you're doing. For example, I'm a spoken word artist. Writing and singing is part of my happy. So I incorporate those very heavily into the activism that I do, using models like Sweet Honey in the Rock as one of the groups that I really enjoy and kind of model some of my work after, and a whole bunch of activists, Nikki Giovanni, Sonia Sanchez, Amiri Baraka, I mean, a bunch of different people that I know did the work this way. So that if I'm incorporating that into the work that I'm doing, then there's always a way for me to tap back into myself and what I consider to be center, so that I don't lose me in the fight for justice for someone else. Mm-hmm. So as not to oppress myself while freeing someone else. You have to make sure that your happy is a part of the work that you're doing. Mm-hmm. So just real, that's real basic, but it's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Amen to that.
Absolutely.
I also think
Oh
just
my gosh, I hate that I have to go. Yeah, go ahead. No. Go ahead.
well, Kim, I was gonna actually just once again say, what would I do without you in this world? And so like I think finding your happy has been like essential, and I think you, which is like weird and like a thing that I had so many feelings about at the time. I was like, there was like us talking over Thanksgiving was actually one of the biggest pieces of self-care that I had in that process, was like being able to be like, hey Kim, person I've built this relationship with who knows me, like we can talk about this, right? Like, am I crazy? Did that just happen? What the
You
hell?
are definitely part of my happy.
Aw.
You are definitely part of my happy. Yes.
That's really big in me. Thank you. Aw.
Yeah.
All the way. Ugh, I'm gonna hide now.
So another thing is that's helpful is just affirmations. Like I have a lot of them that I have to write to myself and say like, you are a great person, you are this, you are that, blah 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 blah. Self-care is really important. I have so many ways that I deal with self-care. Like I read books all the time. Orgasms are great. I cook food and peas all the time. I drink water. I hang out with babies all day. Like, I mean, you know, it's just great. I mean, not all in that order, but it's like it's pretty good for me. And I think like the self-care aspect just helps with like, oh shit, some of my family's gonna see this. One of the important things for me is like I tell myself this every day. I have to have something every day that tells me that I love the fuck out of myself. And if I don't have that, my day is just horrible. I can't do good in the world. And also like it just helps. Affirmations help because we're afraid sometimes that folks are just gonna cut out on us. You know, like that paranoia is there. I don't care if I've known you for 25. I have a friend who I've known for 21 years. And sometimes I say some shit to him that he has to come back to me with. And sometimes I'm like, damn, I said some fucked up shit. But, you know, that aspect of, like, being fearful that someone we love is going to see something wrong with us or that we have to correct is important. And also, like, listening and modeling communication is so important. Like saying, hey, you're an important person in my life. Like that right there can change everything because I have had conversations with folks with food. I hate having conversations around people with good food and the conversations are fucked up because I'm trying to eat macaroni and cheese and then you said some fucked up shit and now my macaroni and cheese is not. So, you know, in order to make that be good again, like, self-care. Like, I take myself out of the room and talk to myself for a minute, and I'm like, no, Amber, they didn't mean that. They did not mean it. Come on, you can go back. Or maybe you can't go back, which is also fine, and then I just eat my macaroni and cheese upstairs. Yeah. Yeah.
Piggybacking on the self-care thing, and kind of, you guys kind of alluded to this already, but just kind of having spaces and people to off-gas and vent and like, what the hell, my family's crazy, or like, I cannot believe this fucked up thing my friend said, and I love them so much, and I want to beat them with a stick right now. And then, so that's one thing. And then the other one, in addition to leaving, but like, one of the things that has been really helpful for me is just like slowing my breathing. Like consciously slowing my breathing so that the adrenaline calms down. And what ends up happening, I've found, is like I'm doing it for self-care. I'm like, whew, we just slow this conversation down, right? I'm doing it for me, but it has the effect of actually benefiting the conversation too. And that extra oxygen is nice. And Amber, I like what you said about drinking water too. I really try to avoid having these conversations when I've been drinking booze. Because they just don't go well.
Yep.
Yeah.
I said some fucked up stuff online the other day when I was drunk, and I was like, okay, no more posting online while drunk. So I had to have a whole conversation about it.
I did not know that you were drunk. That really helps a lot to know.
I told you that.
No, I think Alethea did, but anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah, I split a bottle of wine earlier that I got online. Don't do that, y'all.
Well, I don't want you to leave, Kim, but I respect that you need to, and you're with your family for the holidays. And thank you so much for taking the time that you have out for this. Do you need to go now, or do you want to?
Thank you for making me. Yeah, I do. But thank you for making me a part of this initial conversation, and I'm sure we're gonna have more. So yeah, and keep me posted.
In real life, I'm just, you know, it has to happen, please.
So yeah.
Cool.
We're all gonna talk after, and we're gonna figure out.
We're staying here, yeah.
A way to.
Yeah.
But bye, Kim. Thank you so much.
Bye.
And so much love.
Happy holidays.
Hug all the babies.
Thanks. You too. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
So I think before we get back to, I want us to keep going with the self-care thing for a second, and then I want to get back to the assessment around people, and then we have this a bunch of really great questions. We want to get through them. But I want to put this out there right now. If you're watching and you're enjoying this, and it's feeling useful, and you want to keep the conversation going, we did say that we were going to stop at 6 p.m. I think we should probably honor that as an idea. But if you want to keep the conversation going and you're open to figuring that out, leave a note on either the Facebook page or the Google Hangout events page, and we'll figure out a way to keep this conversation going, because I, as it happens, just love talking to these three people. So if we do more of that, I don't feel bad about it. I feel like that is a good way to use all of our time, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to put that out there, but back to the self-care thing. I think one of the things that you guys have gotten to that I really appreciate. I love all the different versions of it that you set up of like babies, books, water, orgasms, cheese. Also that sounds like we've just painted your world. Also Jesse Williams and anyway.
We're not going to talk about Jesse Williams though right now.
Okay, that's fine.
It's going to throw me off.
But the point of the matter is, I think what this comes down to is remembering that you are in fact a physiological being inside of a body, and not just a floating head that has opinions about how the world should work.
I recall it took you a long time to learn, Tanya.
Yeah, no, I'm saying this because I'm real bad at it. When I'm in the middle of having one of these conversations, I now do a check with myself, and I think it was I had a friend of mine who told me to think of my body like it was a puppy, right? And it's a puppy you're taking care of. So has the puppy slept? Has it had water? Has it had food? Has it played with its friends? Has it peed? What are the things that the puppy is
it's like
needing?
the Tamagotchis or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And realizing that the moment that the conversation is hard might weirdly be related to the moment that your food coma is setting in from the holiday table, and your brain isn't working as well as it could be because all of the blood in your body is digesting food in your stomach. Those are things worth noting and being aware of. And also, I love all the things that you said about affirmation, Amber. I feel like that's really useful. I'm the ones that I've heard you do that I really love are "you are important, people notice." Yep. Those are the good ones. I mean, they're all good, but those are the ones where I'm damn, that's, yeah.
Oh, and Lucille Clifton, hello. If y'all don't know about her, you better check her out, because,
fact, yeah, she's great. But in addition to that, being able to, I totally lost track of my brain after you said Lucille Clifton.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize for that. Being able to keep track of what and being gentle with what your body needs, because I think that's part of what the affirmations do in my head that I've seen you use is it seems like it makes space for it to be it's actually okay that you're a human being in a body and you need sleep now.
Yeah.
And so that combination of self-care and gentleness and taking care of the puppy and being cool with the fact that you are in fact a puppy.
And I think too, what self-care is keeping your goals in mind, because if I'm talking to someone and maybe they're getting a lot out of it, but I'm also feeling really drained and or really triggered, if I'm not aligning my goals with my self-care, I can feel off kilter, and that can just not really dilute the message, but it can just burn you out and get you frustrated, and maybe you won't have that conversation again. And I think it's important to be able to space out the things that you're trying to do and think about what are the things that you can do with this person. What are conversations you can have? What are things you can bring up? How can you bring their experience with those conversations in order to get a bigger, to make an impact?
Amber, I love that, because that actually that piece of self-care also ties in really well with the assessment, and like just knowing yourself well enough to be able to set boundaries with people without shutting the conversation down. And I think that's such a powerful thing, to be able to say, hey, like, it seems like we've made some progress here. I can tell that you're excited. I need to take care of myself for a minute, or I need for a while. Can we pick this up next week? What's the next step? If there is a next step with this person, and presumably for, you know, people that we care about, like, we'll pick it back up, you know, and I know that, you know, Tanya and I have had these conversations for years, and I think we've tested a lot of stuff on each other over the years, but like, there have been times where one of us is like on fire, like, in the conversation, like, let's go, and the other one's like, I actually, like, last night even, I was like, okay, it's 2 a.m., we have, like, it will be there tomorrow, we can sleep, like, I didn't go to bed till 4:30, I was busy editing things.
I got you.
Yeah, that like setting boundaries to without getting so blown out that your limits are being crossed. Like, I like to make a distinction between your boundaries and your limits. Like, your boundaries are flexible, and your limit is like where harm gets caused, and it's
so
okay.
your hard line.
Yeah, you don't want that one to get. You set your boundary far enough out that if it gets crossed accidentally, you're not causing damage.
Yeah. Right.
So
and it's hard
as well.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Really good points, Marsha. Kind of just touching on that a little bit, it gets frustrating too when you do this work, whether you identify as an ally, an activist, an organizer, all of the three, you make a distinction between them. It gets frustrating when you're like the person that feels like you're doing the work all the time in those conversations. So checking in with yourself to be like, I need a break, because I feel like I'm putting so much into this and I'm not really getting anything out of this is important. And also, I think limits are important. Like, usually I'm against ultimatums, because sometimes they seem like just right, like you just instantly do it. But for me, like, there are ultimatums. Like, so I can be like, okay, well, if you continue to do this in this conversation, we're gonna have to end it. Or if you continue to say like racist remarks while we're at the dinner table, or rapey remarks, which
Also no.
like I ain't about that shit at all. I just will be like, well, I'm not gonna sit at your dinner table anymore. That's how it's gonna have to be, you know, because you have to be able to figure out what your hard line is and things that you are not gonna compromise.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm not gonna be okay with or sit with any racist comments, any rapey comments, any transphobic, Islamophobic comments, any of that. So when you have that limit, you can say, okay, well, I might be able to be flexible on these things, but if we get close to here, we're stopping. That's it.
Yeah. I've had similar experiences with that. Like, I find that I do that often, and it's come up more online than in other places, like friends or people I grew up with, or like family, where I'm like, damn, we can talk about this privately, but we cannot talk about it publicly anymore, because there are too many people I love who I don't need hearing your bullshit. But like, and I think that's in terms of practical tools, like, that's a really useful one, is being able to be like, I love you, we're gonna keep having this conversation, we're not doing it in X, Y, and Z way. And I think it's useful also, like when I've come to those hard lines, I usually come to it also like the moment where it's like, no, I'm not sitting at your dinner table anymore, also has, I love you though, like, and this is how I will interact with you.
Right.
And like, when you put those two things together, like it's a way to keep the channel open without making it feel like people have like access to you in ways that they don't need to. Because I think it's super important the way that you're just like, I hit the limit, I'm done.
I mean, it affects people. So like, say if I'm saying this to my uncle or something like that, and I'm telling him like, actually no, like, the things that you said were really harmful to me. If you're going to continue doing this, I cannot be here for that. At the end of the day, whether they are like hella racist or just shady as fuck, like they're going to think about that afterwards. And every time that they don't see you, they're going to be like, oh, wait, why is Amber not at the dinner table anymore? Hold up. What happened there?
Yeah.
So even if it's a thing that doesn't, because there are going to be some people you will not be able to reach.
Yeah.
That is something that I tell myself
every day. Yeah.
It's so hard to believe, but there are going to be people you don't.
Yeah.
No matter how fucking brilliant we are.
Actually, switch the conversation. Can we use that as a segue back to like talking about like tools for assessing and addressing people?
Yes. First, I'm gonna just do a shameless plug. It's really shameless. I am doing a night of healing in Oakland at one of my friends' houses because I think it's really important. Like when you go to protests and stuff like that, I haven't seen that much healing work being done. There have been healing stations and stuff like that, but I haven't felt like there's been a lot of space for people to communicate and also like have some allyship going on, but also mainly just like Black people and people of color having space to scream, cry, hit pillows, punch couches. Like that shit might actually happen. And allies too. Allies that are okay with that and none of that all lives matter shit. Y'all can come too. It's from 5 to 8 on the 29th, which is next Monday. Bring some food. Don't bring no alcohol, not even wine. It's not happening. Hit me up on my Facebook page. Find me. My name's Amber Butts. There are not that many of us out there. That's it.
She's findable.
Can I jump into? I want to piggyback on something you said before the plug.
Oh, yeah.
Which is going into the strategy in the assessment thing again. I think it's really helpful in these conversations to have a sense of both what you're moving toward and what you're moving away from. And I think sometimes it's really easy to get wrapped up in, I don't want that to happen, I don't want that to happen, I don't want that to happen. And having that clear is good, but having a sense too of what do I want to see happen instead? Like, it's not just that I want to stop you from being racist, it's that I want you to get something. And we are going to be putting together a series of transcripts of actual conversations people have had. That friends of mine and Tanya's and Amber's and also of us, we're going to anonymize a lot of it, but of actual conversations that people had. And there's one that's in there that I just love because it's with a friend of mine and her 80-year-old grandmother, both white ladies, where my friend is trying to actually explain, no, grandma, white privilege is in fact a thing. And like, they get there, and they actually get there. And she's, you know, the way my friend described it, you know, her grandmother was having this whole moment of, oh, I've been doing the whole world wrong for 80 years. I guess I got some stuff to learn. And that's a huge, huge, huge moment, right? And in the process of the conversation, there's like tons of fucked up shit she says. And like, I don't think my friend would have gotten there if she hadn't gotten clear. Like, and I don't know, I haven't talked to her that much, but my reading of it was that if you're not clear about what the goal of the conversation, like, I want grandma to get that white privilege is a thing. Like, she's gonna say a bunch of fucked up shit on the way.
Yeah.
Don't let yourself get off track from that. So having that clear toward and that clear away from is really helpful.
Yeah.
Good.
Also, the thing I brought up, I think, in the second question, maybe the first, the feelings of like, okay, well, this is what I heard and felt. Is this what you meant? I think that piggybacking off of what Marsha is saying would be really helpful, because I don't want to sit back and listen to somebody say hella fucked up shit, and I'm just like getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and then hoping that we come together and there's like this small or big aha moment. I also want to be authentic to my experience as someone who's a person of color, but also someone who thinks this shit matters. Like, you don't have to be Black or a person of color to think that this shit is important. We already know that. I just want to like remind folks, you on here because you think this is important. Yeah.
So I want to jump in and say, like, on top of getting clear on like what you're able to tolerate and like how you want to assess, like, I think it's really important to, there are two things that I do with every person that I'm talking to about this stuff. And the first is this is going to sound really calculated, but it's true. Like, I stop and think about what the impact of this conversation is potentially. I mentioned this before. I tend to focus a lot more energy on parents, people who have young people in their lives that they're raising. I tend to focus a lot more energy on people who are socially active and who have, like, a lot of people who are listening to them. And I do that because I'm clear that, like, when it feels hard and there's, like, a lot of work going into it, I can like look at it and be like, but the impact isn't just this one person. Like, the impact goes out in all these directions. Yeah. And one of the places that's been really successful for me over the past, I guess it's been like 2.5 years, something like that, that I've been having conversations with a very, very dear friend of mine in the Bay that actually started with this person saying something to the effect of, I need you to explain to me why you think it's important that I have friends who are black. Like, we started from that position a couple years ago. And through, like, a lot of patient conversation, like, the reason that I was engaged with this person was, in part, they're very close to me, and I can't actually have that kind of thinking in, like, near my heart. It just is bad for me. But then the other piece that came up for me around it was, like, this person is a programmer. They're in tech. They can talk to tech people in ways that I just can't because I don't think like that. And what's happened over the course of like, since Mike Brown's murder, like, moving forward, I've watched this particular person become, like not just get it, but get it enough to be talking to other people, and I've watched them over and over again engage with tech folks who are, like, thinking with, like, statistic brains, which is not a way that I think, basically, ever, and they've been able to communicate over and over again in those spaces, and like, understood the order of ways that things need to get communicated, such that, like, all of these people are having their minds changed. And so, like, I stop and I think about, like, what the impact of that person having their mind changed is, and whether or not that's worth me continuing to put in energy. And, like, once I have that assessment of the person, it makes it feel a lot better. Like part of what made the 80-year-old racist grandma story so amazing is she's, like, super active in her, like, she's very social. She's talking to a lot of other, like, older, like she's engaged in her community in a way that is, like, super, super important. And I think like, making that assessment is important because, like, if like, that made our friends' investment in that conversation go so far, because all of those women are still voting, you know what I mean? Like, they're still civically engaged in the world, and they now have a friend who's, like, who gets white privilege. And then the other thing that I do, and then I think Amber is right, we need to get to questions, especially because there are so many questions that I want you to be able to answer, because, like, so many need, they're just, like, heart feelings. Okay. The other thing that I spend a lot of time doing is, like, everybody was talking earlier, Kim and Amber were talking about not manipulating your family, but, like, knowing your family and knowing how they tick kind of makes a really big difference. So what I would say is doing research, and I don't mean if you don't know things, you can't talk about things, but, like, I read up on this shit pretty compulsively, and I recommend that you do. It's incredibly painful work. I don't recommend it because it's recreationally enjoyable. I recommend it because it makes what we're capable of doing possible.
And we're putting together a reading guide for folks, too.
Yeah. It's also very addicting, but there's a transformative aspect of this that we're really focusing on. And I forgot what the movie is, but it's with, like, Haley Joel Osment, and he does, Pay It Forward, right? Yeah. So, like, I don't want to reference, like, a movie about a white kid, like, living with all kind of white kids, but I will for the sake of movie that's huge for me. So it's kind of like the Pay It Forward thing, right? Okay, so, like, you know, even if I don't reach, like, all of these people, I reach this one person that reaches a few other people. Mm-hmm. And even if those 2 or 3 people don't do the thing, one of those people does, and then they go to, like, other people, and then, like, you can fucking change worlds and shit. Yeah. And keep doing the work and being committed, because we're only talking about the beginning processes of this.
Yeah, like I said, ongoing conversation. But I just want to jump back in and get this idea out. So I've been using a bunch of different approaches because I have all this information in my brain, because I've read up on, you know, like, the details of Mike Brown's murder, and I know about what happened. Because I've been reading the reports, I know where to pull the information from, and there's, like, an intuitive understanding. Like, so I'm talking to one uncle at Thanksgiving, and he says, well, we just don't actually know what happened, and that's part of why a grand jury does what it does. And I know him well enough to know that, like, I look at it and I'm like, I can tell you details about what happened to Mike Brown, or I can tell you details about, and like, I looked at him and I was like, no, you know what, the thing that's going to get this guy, because I know him, is I can look at him and be like, you know that the American Bar Association, right, you know that the, oh, okay, yeah, this, I'm trying to get into specific tools, sorry. Like, I look at it and I go, I know this person, so I know that when I bring up that the American Bar Association publicly condemned the grand jury verdict, and like that's a piece of news he hasn't had before, that's going to change his mind, because that's an institution he respects. And another aunt that I sat and talked with, where I just went through all of the details of what happened to Eric Garner and what his family life looked like, and like the story there was more important. And so it's like, that's part of what's important, is like we were talking about like giving you models and scripts, and like those things are important, but they're not necessarily as useful as saying trust your gut, admit that you know your family, and like let yourself have the research. Do we so Marcia, if you want to talk about tools, you go right ahead, but before we do that, I want to get to some of the questions, especially the ones that there were like 2 that we read, and I was just like, I'm so glad we're doing this. But if we want to end at 6, that puts us at 5 minutes from right now. Do we want to have this go slightly longer?
Can we push it to like 6?
I can stick around, and there's not a lot of comments, but folks are saying please keep the conversation going.
Okay.
So maybe we'll go a little long.
Yeah, let's push it to 6:15 so that we can get to some questions.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. What are some specific tools you want to talk
about? A couple things that I found in like opening up the conversation with people is to like, sometimes it lands in your lap and sometimes you like want to open it up. One of the specific things that I've heard, and because it's 2 days before Christmas, this might be something that people can actually use. A friend of mine told me he was going to ask his mother if they could have a conversation about Mike Brown and Ferguson, and that for what he wanted for Christmas was for her to consider his point of view. Like, wow. And I thought that was a really cool way to reach out and like start from like, I have a thing that matters enough to me that I'm going to frame it as like a gift you can give me is to listen to me.
Yeah,
that was super, super cool. A second thing in terms of, and we've kind of alluded to this, but we haven't said it, I don't think, quite like this, is because these are conversations with people we love, thinking one of the goals we can have, if it seems appropriate, is planting seeds. So in addition to the pay it forward model, which I think is very, very, very much part of how I operate, another way, kind of, Tatiana, the thing that you said about your friend, you know, talking to the tech people, like, it takes years sometimes to get there. And, like, just planting the seeds and continuing to be compassionate, having the conversation when you have the space for it, internally, you have the internal resources for it, so that you can continue to foster a positive experience with these people you love around this thing, that it's not like, I'm just going to come home and yell at you every holiday season, but, like, I'm going to keep bringing it up, but every time I'm going to tell you I love you and that I want to be in connection with you.
Yeah.
And then the third thing I want to say is, this is not universally true, however, it is a bias that I have found to be incredibly helpful for navigating these conversations, is I walk around with a fundamental assumption that anytime I encounter somebody being angry, especially white people about race or men about feminism or, you know, whatever, but really anybody, this kind of works, is I assume that underneath the anger is fear. And I get really curious about, okay, so I'm hearing that you're really angry. What's going on for you? Like, let's stop the conversation about the topic. You're somebody I care about. And, like, I kind of have an assumption that, you know, anger is one of the things that, this is just my belief, I don't know if this is true, but it works for me in conversations, that if someone's angry, it's because they're scared of something. And sometimes that might be, like, there are real people dying and I'm afraid I might be next, right? Or there's something really fundamental that I can't see, but I have an emotional, intuitive sense that my entire identity is built around it.
Right.
It could be anything, but that there's a fear there, and if I can understand what people are afraid of and address that in some way, it helps so much. So those are the things I wanted to say, and I'll be quiet.
Good point, Marsha. Great point.
Can I bring up? Thank you so much, Marsha. Yeah. That was good. I'm like, hey, person who's now in charge of time in my brain, can I just bring up one more thing?
How did I become the timekeeper? Oh, a good book. Read that book, The Timekeeper by Mitch Albom. Yeah.
So the thing that I wanted to bring up from there is that I think it's really important when we're doing this work with our families to recognize, like, and I'm not speaking to the lived experience of Black people, I'm talking like as a white person. I think it's really important to notice that, like, there is nobody else whose job it is, there's nobody else who is going to have access to be kind and affirming in the ways that we do with each other. And, like, very often, a lot of the fights that I see happening, and one of the resources that's going to come up later that you'll all get to take a look at, like, I had a conversation with somebody who was like, I just can't deal with the fact that, like, everybody is saying that, like, you know, if I'm a person in uniform, that makes me a bad man or whatever. And, like, it is not Amber's job to ever tell that guy that she knows he's a good dude. That's not her job. That guy in the example that I'm talking about who said that to me, is a kid that I taught in Hebrew school. So to a greater extent, like, it is in fact my job to be like, hey, I know you are a good person. I am not saying you are a bad person. Now that we have that cleared up, can we continue this difficult conversation? And I think that dynamic happens in intimate spaces in ways that it's not possible, and it shouldn't have to be possible in public spaces when you're talking to strangers, you know? So while I think it's important to set boundaries and stuff like that, I think it's also really important to know what you have available to you. Like there's like some of the most effective tools that I've had in having these conversations has been just being able to be like, hey, remember how I've known you since you were 12? I love the shit out of you, and I'm not leaving. And I know you're a good person. And Black people are being murdered in the streets. Can we fix it? And I really think
these all get to coexist as true simultaneously. The whole dichotomy thing is so frustrating.
Totally, and it's really important though to get that order of operations done right. You know, because like, they're not going to get that any place else, the people that you're talking to. So you got to give it to them first, and then all that fear will just shut the fuck up, and they'll be able to actually listen and have a conversation. Yeah. Okay, that's what I had to say.
Compassion is important. Yeah. Also, just you saying, like, yeah, like, this ain't Black people's job. I'm just happy about that part.
I think that so that everybody gets that, because I don't know that everybody always gets that.
Also, yeah, Marsha and I are going to post a bunch of great resources. I posted one that I forgot the title, but it's something like, what do we do with, like, white people?
I don't know what to do with good white people.
I don't know what to do with good white people.
I love that article.
Such a great article. I love it. We're going to jump into the questions now, which I'm so excited about. Y'all are great. Shit.
There's some really good questions in here.
There are. I'm going to jump into one real quick because it's just, like, speaking to me. And I'm so bad with technology, so folks, just, you know.
God. Yeah, so Google dumps this all into a spreadsheet, and so we're, like, going through a spreadsheet right now. Which one are you looking for?
Josette.
The question, I can read it. I can read it to you. Do you have any advice on how to channel the incredible rage, pain, sadness, and fury one can feel when learning about and addressing systematic devaluing of Black lives? I find that I often feel incredibly overwhelmed by my emotional responses to incidents that devalue Black lives, and I feel as if this, if not managed productively, can hinder any work that I might do to address the issue.
Yep. And so Josette, like, identifies as a 23-year-old Afro-Latina who has absolutely no tolerance for oppression. Hey, pal. So I'm going to talk because I love the question, also because I have experience with it. One of the things that I do is, like, I don't try to not be angry. Like, that's just not something that I do. It's not. I try to channel that anger, but before I try to channel it, I fucking go scream. I hit pillows. I get angry. Sometimes I dance. Sometimes it looks like twerking, but it's not. I'm just, like, stomping at the floor, upset. And I think, like, sometimes, like, society, like, and Josette, you might know, hopefully I'm saying your name right. You know, you are an Afro-Latina, so you're experiencing dual things, dual identities, dual oppression, dual everything. And And so I think it's important for you to be able to be authentic with yourself and say what your goals are, say what you want out of like the conversation that you have with people if you decide to. But before all of that, like one of the most important things is to check in with yourself, how you're feeling about how you feel about yourself. Because like fucking fear is crazy. Like for real, like there are days when I wake up and I'm like, damn, like I could actually be killed today. That is a real thing. That is a scary thing. That is something that people don't acknowledge all the time. So yeah, you have to like know that you have a right to be angry. And you also have a right to be angry, and if you don't choose to get your point across, that's cool. Like it's okay. Like you can do that. But if the goal is for you to get your point across, channeling that anger into something productive is helpful. So like, for instance, if I'm out specifically with a loved one and I'm like, I'm really upset right now, and I'm talking to like Tatiana and I'm like, Tatiana had a fucked up day. I'm hella mad right now, man. You know, all this shit has happened. Black people are getting killed every day. I'm really upset. I don't fucking want to talk to you right now. Or like however these conversations go, right? I'm trying to think of like things that I would say off the top of my head. Going into that and saying like, I feel like this because of this can often feel traumatic, and like you have to explain things, but I always try to keep in mind that like some people are worth explaining things to. Some people aren't, and I'm like, fuck it, go read a book. I'm gonna send you some links. I have done that with one of my friends. I sent her hella links. I don't know if she read it. But yeah, like being kind to yourself and finding like spots where you show like how much you love yourself. Like Kim was talking about finding your happy. That's really important. That's a really important dynamic, because then you have a balance. You can go into a situation and still be angry, but not enraged, right? And rage is a whole nother thing. And I think rage is so important. I'm not saying you should not feel that, because feel that shit. But it all depends on like how you're feeling with yourself and what you want to like bring across. Yeah.
I just want to remind you of some things that you said when you were practicing this version of this.
I forget these things.
Yeah, no, I because like it was just really powerful when you were talking about it, and I want to make sure that y'all get all of that. You were talking about knowing what your triggers are and like being prepared for them. So.
So knowing what your triggers are, what things like upset you already are really important, because then you can like prepare for them if you want to. You can know when you need to say, okay, I need to take a step back on this, because this person just said something that's really triggering to me, and the only way that I can react to this is negatively. I can react with, hey, violence, because that's a real thing. I can react with a screaming match, and ultimately, either one of those, we don't get our point across. And so if the goal is to get your point across, then you just didn't do that thing.
So there's two sets of two questions that are pretty similar, and I want to see if we can get to those two. Is that cool to move on?
Makes sense.
Cool. I'll just do this one first because I think I want to spend a little more time on it. So there's two versions of a kind of similar question. They're not identical, but one question is, I am a black woman. Many of my white friends are uncannily silent on this topic. How do I engage them without feeling hurt by their silence? I believe they have applied colorblindness to our personal relationships and that I am somehow at fault for that. And this feels tangential to that. This is from a friend of mine. And she writes, are there ways biracial, multiracial people and black people more comfortable in white spaces can help facilitate conversations between white and black people who may be less trusting or less familiar with each other? Are there pitfalls for biracial, multiracial people to avoid in these interactions?
Good. Okay. All right. So let's go with the silencing one first. So I have some white friends too. White friends, y'all. But my white friends, I require them to not be silent on these topics. That is something that I don't compromise ever. If you do, or you feel like you are, one of the things to like remind yourself of is that you can't carry all that weight. Like you're saying, you feel like you're somehow at fault for the color blindness that your friends are experiencing. But on the same level, have some accountability for it, right? So if you notice that that is a pattern that you might be perpetuating, having a conversation with your friends about it and doing it in like as clear of a manner as you can. Also, how do you engage without feeling hurt by their silence? For me, that's not a thing that I can actually give you any tools on, because I'm always hurt by my friends' silence, and I don't know how you cannot be hurt when they are. But I will think about that, and if you want to like message me and ask me or any of us about that, then I'll try to touch on that.
I want to just offer a thing that I've already heard said before, but like especially like this is a heartbreaking question to read, and I think like before you try and address that, I want, because like I don't know, Marcia and I were also talking about another friend who's like in Vegas and has nobody around who's talking about this shit, and like I think it's important for you to be able to not feel alone, and like you live in Silicon Valley, like come to the thing Amber's throwing, like message us and get details about it, and like come be with people who understand, because I feel like that makes that like will recharge your batteries, and we can all talk about it in that sort of situation, so that you don't have to like, that's not a thing you should have to carry by yourself. And like you're not like, you're one person who's like asked this question in like a group of like hundreds of people, hundreds and hundreds of people like near you, and then thousands all around you. And like I think like especially in figuring out, like I know what it's like to be in a claustrophobic space. It's not the same thing, but I know what it's like to be in a space where you're like convinced that nobody around you is caring about the same thing, and like you're actually like physically being harmed by it. And like the first and most important thing is to know like you're not alone. You don't have to be alone, and like whatever it takes to make you feel like connected to people who care about your life and like you being happy, like we want to be around to do that.
And also, like, thank you for all of the context. Like, Silicon Valley is a rough spot. Like, 2% black folk, like, that's rough. If you can come here, and we'll do fun stuff. And I'm sending you a lot of hugs, because shit, like, that is rough. It's really rough. I'm going to go. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
One thing real quick, too, because I think this is maybe relevant. I might be putting the person I knows context onto this one, but I want to qualify what I'm about to say like crazy, though, because I want to just start with, it is not your job to educate white folks.
Oh, yeah.
Nope.
However, if that's something you choose to decide to do, I've been having a lot of conversations with white people about this, and the thing that I keep hearing over and over and over again is, I want to bring it up, but I don't know how, and I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. So I think what's happening in interpersonal, like friendships, things with people who care about each other, is everyone's avoiding the elephant in the room because everyone's afraid of hurting one another. And one of the reasons I was so excited about this conversation is that, you know, it is worse, I think, to not acknowledge something that's painful than it is to acknowledge it incorrectly. Yeah. Because if you at least are talking about it and you give a shit about each other, like if these are people you don't care about, don't take care of yourself. But if they're actually people that you want to be closer to, and this is kind of true for everybody, I feel, if they're people you actually want to be closer to, take the step to be closer about the thing that matters. And it shouldn't be your job. It's fucked up that like no one's talking to you about it. Like people should be white folks, ask your black friends how they're doing and listen. Like, just ask, how are you?
You just start with like, the world is fucked up and I love you. How are you?
Yeah. Like, that's a good start.
Shit, I'm gonna be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna talk to you. But yeah, don't, like, one of the things I'm not cool with is like acting like you're an expert on the subject because you read a couple articles.
Yeah, don't do that.
Or one thing that happened to me that I'm just, because this is just the type of person I am, one of my friends told me that she was feeling like I was attacking all white people. that ain't a cool thing for you to say. Like, say that to your white friends. Don't come to people of color and say that, because for real, like, that was disrespectful as hell for me, okay? And I'm questioning a lot of things with that.
Wait, can I throw in one more
Go
idea?
ahead.
I think this is actually a really useful thing, because we've had a lot of questions about social spaces and social situations.
Yeah.
I want to like give everybody permission to use the buddy system.
Oh yeah.
I love the shit out of the buddy system. I have been the white buddy. I have been, and like, it is a super useful thing. Like, especially because, like, talking to people about it, right? Like, that's a big,
Can you
complicated
explain the buddy
idea.
system,
Yeah.
so folks know?
For sure. Thanks. But like, in my situation, like, the thing that I've noticed is, like, when it's, like, talking to people, it's this big amorphous idea. But if you have one friend, you know, who you've, like, had the conversations that you need to with in order to, like, start to have some kind of trust, and you've got, like, an understanding of it, like, you can stop, like, the instances that I've been the buddy in have been, like, mostly after a problematic incident, but we're kind of naturally in a series of incredibly problematic incidents. So, like, I was at an open mic, and this performer, white-seeming, like, white-passing performer, got on stage and dropped the N-word a bunch of times in a poem. And I ran into a friend of mine outside who was, like, really, really, really upset and was like, you better go talk to your friend. And I was like, probably, who? What's going on? And, like, as we talked it through, like, once she told me what had happened, I was like, wow, that is fucked up. I'm really sorry that happened. What do you need around that? And, like, having that kind of an interaction with somebody where it's like, you tell them what happened and they don't need to, like, justify or defend. They're just like, wow, that's fucked up. Like, that's a really good sign that that's a good person to have as your buddy.
Yep.
And when we talked, she was like, yeah, I think that person needs to get talked to. And I was like, cool, word. Do you want me to do the talking to them? Do you want to have me present while you do the talking? Do you want to just come back to me and tell me what do you need? And there are, like, a bunch of different versions of that you can do, where it's like, I'm going to be in a situation where I don't know if I'm going to need a buddy. And, like, having that talked out in advance makes it possible to have a lot more of those conversations happen, because, like, you just know you have support built in. Yeah. Do you want to say more about that? Or?
No, I mean, I think that's really important. Like, and also, like, asking questions from someone who's triggered, like, asking questions of someone who is triggered is really important, too, so that you're not dictating their experience. You're asking what they need in that space. Asking what someone needs in that space is so important.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's possible sometimes they won't know how to respond, and that's okay too, but you gotta at least ask. You gotta at least try. You know?
The worst thing you can do is assume you know the answer and act on it. Don't do that. Don't do it.
Good ideas.
Don't do it.
Yep.
Cool. So, Marsha, are we asking the biracial question?
Yeah, let's piggyback that one.
Cool. Okay. Do you want me to read it?
Are there ways biracial, multiracial people and black people more comfortable in white spaces can help facilitate conversations between white and black people who may be less trusting or less familiar with each other? And are there pitfalls for biracial, multiracial people to avoid in these interactions?
This is an interesting question. My first inclination is just to say, if you're multiracial and you got some black in you black, like, you're black. But also, like, if you identify as something else, that's totally fine. I'm not saying anything about that. The other thing that I was thinking about is, like, also, like, we got to figure out what our jobs are and what people need, which is important. Like, you're asking questions, so that's really important. But I do want to say, like, it's not your job to do that if that's something that you feel is important. And you can kind of act as mediator, translator, whatever word you want to use for that is. Sure. I'd, like, talk to, like, your close circle, because some folks can maybe, like, not be okay with that. But also, I just lost my train of thought. You want to hop on and then I'll figure out what I was saying.
Yeah, so I don't think it's particularly useful for me to talk about, like, how black people or multiracial people can interact in spaces, but so I'm not going to do that part, but I do think it's important, and, like, I hope that it's clear that I'm doing that with respect. It's just, like, that's not my place. I do think it's important to acknowledge that, like, especially in these situations, we have this idea that, like, all of this shit has been so taboo socially for so long that people just don't talk about it, period. And I think, like, it's really useful to come at these moments, like, name the moment,
and create an opportunity for people to opt into behaving differently. You know what I mean? Like, I think consent is like a really important part of it. Like, assuming that one person, that any person, because of their identity, should be fitting a role or doing a job is like not a good fit, right? Like, also people are different from day to day. Like, some days you're ready to facilitate a conversation, some days you're really not. But like, being able to be in a space where like, instead of just being run by it, like, this is important. The way that we're all socialized to stay silent perpetuates the bullshit of oppression and racism.
Yep.
And so, like, in these, like, moments where it's like, oh, tensions are really high because something shitty is happening, even, like, just saying out loud, like, there are tons of examples that I can think of on a day-to-day basis where even just saying out loud, like, shit feels really awkward right now. Like, I feel like there's a thing happening that none of us have any control over. Can we just acknowledge that? Like, I feel like that is probably one of the most useful things we can do. Or, like, even, like, there's a difference between, like, oh, am I being racist, which is, like, a defensive thing people will say, and, like, I'm really scared of doing something that would hurt you right now. Like, as soon as somebody says, I'm really scared of doing something that would hurt you right now, all of a sudden, like, the conversation is different. How did that happen?
Yeah.
And so I think, like, without telling anybody how to behave based on their identity, naming the thing, acknowledging where we are, and asking if we want to behave differently, like taking those steps would pretty much not cures, but like at least puts us on a path to like having a different conversation from the ones that we're used to.
There's also a good article, I don't remember what it's called. It might be called like how to be around for your lover. I'm not going to say that. There's an article that was recently posted by Black Girl Dangerous, and there's a woman that talks about being a woman of color but not a black woman, and supporting her partner through the Black Lives Matter experience and all of that, which I think would be a great resource for the question that's being asked. Yeah.
I think it's 6:20, which is 5 minutes longer.
Say a thing?
Yeah, sure. What's up?
I just wanted to highlight something subtle in what you said, Tanya, which is there's a huge difference between saying, I hope I'm not being racist, and I hope I'm not doing something that hurts you. And the thing that points to is in the first case, it's sort of like an external assessment of me, and in the second one, it's you're in relationship. The two people are in relationship, and I think. I mean, this is my bias. I'm a relationship coach. I'm all about relationships. But, like, I feel that one of the things, and this is certainly not the only thing, one of the things that is going to get us through this whole nightmare of learning how to talk about it, much less doing anything about it, anyway, is, like, just being in relationship with one another and being like, hey, you are a unique person over there having your own unique experience, and I am over here having my unique experience, and now we're coming together, and like, let's talk about what that is right now. What's it like right now for us? So I would not presume to say what anybody should do based on their position, and keeping in mind all of self-care things and goals and all of that we've talked about. I think that is at least a through line.
Yeah. So that was super, super valuable, Marcia. Thank you for sharing that. I also, though, want to just point out it is 6:22. We have so many more questions we haven't answered, and there are more questions coming up right now. Like Robin Renee just posted this amazing thing where she said she'd like to hear more about what communication Kim feels worked with older generations that didn't with younger folks. I also am really excited about Robin Renee and Kim McCrae knowing each other. That's so good. This whole thing is just a complete win. We probably should wrap this up because also we're about to be posting like a 2-hour video.
Thank you all for your patience with us.
Robin will totally answer your question also. I'll post some resources and also get Kim, because you specifically asked for her, to write some things as well.
Well, and I think what would be really useful for us in like closing this out. Also, thank you for Marcia for like spurring this being a thing. Amber, thank you so much for being willing to do this. This has been so fun. I want this to keep going, and so what I'm wondering from you viewers is if you wouldn't mind like letting us know I think we need to come up with like manageable ways to do this that aren't 2-hour-long YouTube videos. Like maybe we could do like a 10 or 15-minute answer like a question or two type thing and just keep the conversation going.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're interested in that kind of thing, please let us know. We're gonna come up with some way to like get everybody to like be able to stay in touch who wants to be part of this conversation moving forward. I think there are a lot of really good questions that are happening, and like I'm excited for it. I hope you have tools, viewers who have been like watching. I hope you have tools that make you feel good about going and talking to your family and like seeing it as a long game and seeing that as like one of the big things that you can be doing to make social change happen and like save lives, actually, literally. So yeah, I think are we moving towards, should we hit stop?
Sure. Let me give a couple quick reminders. One is really important to be authentic to yourself and have your voice be heard and all of that, and also know when you're feeling hurt and harmed and things like that.
Yep.
Take advantage of these people. I mean, not like that, but take advantage of knowing these people, because you can have a lot of like practice conversations and also like longevity like conversations with your family members about like these things that you're learning, and then put them into your daily life with like your coworkers, like friends that are iffy, you know, you can figure out they were your real friends or whatever. Like, yeah, tips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And definitely, yeah. There's so much more I want to say about being authentic. That was such a good, basically just everything she said, like underlined and then highlighted. Mark, do you have anything you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I mean, just highlighting things that we've talked about, regardless of what you do with these conversations with the people you love, please take care of yourself. Please don't let the conversation die. Like, even if it's just a little seed planting, like, that's better than nothing. Like, please, 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 please. I invite everyone to take a step to be just a little bit braver and a little bit more self-valuing and a little bit more compassionate with the people, even when they're saying the fucked up things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to throw out one last thing, and then I think we clearly have to close this out. I said this earlier, and I think this is like the big takeaway for me. Let yourself feel this.
Yeah.
Letting yourself feel the truth of what's happening in our country is going to make it clear to you what you must do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I don't mean like there's a thing that happens where like you start to hear a thing and like I know what it feels like, where you get like really emotionally overwhelmed and you don't know how to like I gotta do something, and that's where I think a lot of white people yelling comes from. It's like the stress of like, oh my god, something must happen. But like sit with it, let understanding what's happening in the world right now change you.
Mm-hmm.
It feels impossible. It feels like it'll kill you. It feels like it'll hurt you. It won't do any of those things. It just, actually, the thing that you're feeling is your compassion coming back online. So, like, let that happen.
And be consistent. Keep it up.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And let that be the thing that you're speaking to your family with, is like an alive, compassionate heart that's like not burning out.
Okay, now you're gonna make me cry.
Take care of yourself. Important, important, important.
Yes.
Yeah. This has been really, really tremendously, like, I hope everybody is having as good a time as I had doing it, because this has been really awesome. But thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Bye, Marcia. I wish I could hug you, but you're far away.
Bye, Marcia.
I will hug you both tomorrow.
Oh, yes! Yay!
All right. And thank you so much, Kim, for joining us and for giving us your work. It was totally, totally invaluable.
Absolutely.
Hug somebody. Take care.